Welcome, all of you who are here. I wish I could see you. I wish we were gathering together in different circumstances, but I so appreciate that you all are here right now. The purpose of Creative Strategies for Connecting with Your Neighbors is to really talk about how in this unprecedented time we can still continue to serve each other and therefore serve God without having close personal interaction, which can cause more harm right now. So tonight we're going to share ways to continue ministries with social distancing so that we can connect with all of our neighbors. We will begin with focusing on feeding ministries, but we will also talk about senior care and worship and just connecting with your neighbors in general. Our panelists today are myself as 200,000 Reasons Project Coordinator, and then Reverend Dr. Michelle Morris, who's coordinating course and hosting us as well. Amy Azell is with us as Director of Communications, and then we've also invited Reverend Sam Metters, who's the campus minister at A-State and is doing a food pantry there, and I wanted to get her input into this conversation. This is a time for collaborating and for chatting. Please help us collaborate. We want those creative ideas. And so we can read your chats, we'll interject. We need you as experts to provide what you're doing on the ground. Y'all are there making things happen, and I'm just passing on some information that I'm getting from resources. I am connecting you, and we need to be all connected together with great ideas. We wanted to start with some scripture, and I'm going to let Michelle Morris kind of bring us into a wonderful spiritual space in conversation.
Sure. Before that, I will point out, as Mary Louise said, we do want your ideas, we want your questions, we want your chat. I just invite you on the to line to pay attention to who you are actually asking the questions of. Are you asking just all the panelists, or are you in fact sharing that with everybody? And since this is a space where we love collaboration, we do invite you to share it with everyone if you're comfortable doing that. So choose all panelists and attendees to make sure everyone can see it. So yes, we want to focus our questions around scripture. We want to focus our responses around scripture. And so I'm going to read from Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 29. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law? He replied, how do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this, and you will live. But the expert wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? We want to end with that question, so that sort of frames where we are heading from here. If we leave it right there, then we don't have a definition of who our neighbor is. We have to be creative and think in terms of who we envision our neighbor is and be called into that space. And we're in a time when our neighborhoods are both big and small. And certainly in this moment, in this space, we may feel the overwhelming nature of our neighborhoods. But I want us to stop and be encouraged by the fact that the small actions that we can take here and the actions that we can really take on a local scale are going to make a huge and significant difference in our lives. So as we go through this evening, as we look at the ways that we can respond, let's be open to how that question can be answered. Let's be open to the fact that that's not spelled out for us, but we're invited into the question by Jesus. We are invited to ask ourselves, who is my neighbor? And then we are also invited to ask ourselves how we can respond in a way that shows love to that neighbor. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward for this night. If you don't mind, let me pray for all of us. So let us pray. Lord, we call upon your Holy Spirit to bless this space of relationship, that it might be a place where we can share with one another what our struggles are, but also share with one another what our triumphs are. And that we might be moved in ways that can show your love more meaningfully to the neighbors around us. Help us to be open to your spirit and open to your guidance and open to the creativity that is before us, not only in this evening, but in the days to come. Help us to see you in all things that we do. And help us also to show you to others. Let us be the people who not only love you with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, but who also love our neighbors. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Michelle. And as we're considering our neighbor, we also have to not only take care of them, but ourselves. And so I just want to kind of give a disclaimer that everything we're talking about this evening will have this foundational understanding that we are going to be social distancing. And I'm defining that as keeping a safe distance from each other so as not to spread the virus, which is, I believe the recommended is 6 feet apart. But we also know that as I'm making some suggestions, realities for implementing these may not be able to be followed the way I'm suggesting. So y'all, as I mentioned earlier, are the experts. So hold me accountable, point out when I say something that actually will not work, and we'll address that for sure. One of the things with social distancing I want to remind ourselves is that we continue to treat people with compassion and care. We continue to look people in the eye, and we smile, and we're friendly, and we get their names, and we try to get their stories in as short of possible contact as possible. But we don't want to demean or not recognize the dignity in the position that everybody is in. So some of this underlying basics is this slide that says care for volunteers. Remind people when you are inviting people to serve that they need to stay home if they have symptoms or have been exposed. This is all common sense, but also recognize who you're asking to be your volunteers. And many of our churches use retirees, and people are empty nesters and have still a lot to give, but are not working. And so those also may be our most vulnerable and cannot bounce back from complications as easily from the virus, which means we have to think about who we're recruiting. Some places are considering screening their volunteers. Arkansas Food Bank is actually potentially doing temperature checks. I'm not saying that we all have the capacity to do that, but we certainly can ask them, especially as we invite people from the community, have you been exposed? Have you been traveling or been to any major urban areas? And if the answer is yes, say, we need you to help in a different way instead of being present here today. And we'll talk about how they can do that. If you can get access to gloves and hand sanitizer and soap and water, just make plenty of that available, obviously. And the major rule with this is no congregating opportunities. Don't create an atmosphere where everybody can just sit around and talk around a table for an hours, especially when we're talking about feeding ministries. So there are many strategies for engaging people. And of course, I wanted to kind of just stop and pause for a second.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Michelle?
Yes, we were going to get a sense of where everyone is. And so we have a poll that we want to share with you. Let me pull that up real quick. We're going to ask a couple of questions. One, did you have a feeding ministry in place prior to this situation? So answer yes or no. And then number 2 is, how are you responding now? We have a feeding ministry. We're continuing with social distancing. We didn't have a feeding ministry, but are starting one. We do not have a ministry. We have no plans to start one. We have a ministry, but have put it on hold, or we want to continue, but we aren't sure how. So if you could just take a minute and vote for that, share with us where you are, that'll help us as we present.
Thanks. I'm interested to see the results of that. So I hope you all each take that. And Kenny, I saw your questions and Sam responding. She's going to get to speak in a minute, and we'll help, I hope, share those ideas with everybody around food distribution drive-throughs. So blessing boxes have become very popular, and I can't see this. And they've been great because they provide anonymity and they offer access to food when traditional food pantries are not available or not open, especially for people who work during those normal business hours. And so surprisingly, they're coming in really handy right now, right? If you are going to do a blessing box, you can see an example of one from Concord in the picture, and there are plans on the internet to help you build one. Non-perishable items need to go in there, but also think about food doesn't have to be cooked. You never know what the situations are for those who are coming by and using some of the food from your blessing box or little free food pantry. They may not have a microwave. They may not have a stove. They may be staying at a hotel. So think about variety for that. And then also, because we hope to be feeding many kids as possible, pick some foods that the kids might like as well. I've also found that a lot of churches find that the need for toiletries is really big. That's one of those items that they can trade, but they can't trade rent and other things like that. So please consider that. I did want to go back. That brings up one point I skipped over in my agenda, and that is recognizing the economic impact that's happening and losing access to free meals and all this. We all know this is happening. We've been hearing it on the news. But as you think about what to provide families, food and medicine and toiletries are things that people skimp on because they either hope they can do without for a little bit when it comes to medicine, or hope they can find some else to provide it. And that's what we as the United Methodist Church can do, is provide food and leave more budget money for rent, utilities, gas to get to in their car to get to work. So think about that's just kind of the why of being mindful.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you'll let me share the results real quick.
Yeah, I just can't see the screen with it.
Yeah.
So
there's the results, which is, did you have a feeding ministry in place? Of the folks that answered, yes, they do. Some of them are continuing on, and some of them have put it on hold. And we can talk about why you put those on hold. In fact, if you can share with us why you put them on hold, we'd love to know that and put it in the chat. And then hopefully we can respond with maybe helping you be able to move forward from there. So
yeah, that's great. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So blessing boxes we've talked about, they're an automatic for social distancing, but many of us are really concerned trying to figure out how to do this as a food pantry, right? Some of our churches provide a shopping experience, which is a fantastic way to offer dignity through food choice to our families who are in need. But at this time, shopping experiences really shouldn't be happening. They need to be already boxed or sacked by volunteers and made available. I put up a picture here of an assembly line from Monticello First United Methodist Church who does mobile food distribution, a bunch of youth. They're a little close right now, but setting up stations along an assembly line would be a great way to do that, and putting down tape lines so that people know, I don't cross this line until the next person moves, right? It will help people stay further apart. If you're going to do distributions from the food pantries, try to set up your distribution as close to the door as possible where they normally go in. So you're still easy to find, but it's right there at the door. Some people have to do reporting, and so it might be that if you need to take their name or the number of families they have, create that line on the floor again that creates a safe distance, or set up a table where they can self-report and have a volunteer nearby who if they need to listen. But then set the box down, step back, let somebody else, the family, pick up the box, or you can even leave it outside the door. We want to minimize their coming into the church. But we know that weather may prevent that. So as close to the door as you can get, that's where you need to be. And then make deliveries to the car people don't have to get out of the car. The volunteers can just take it to the car and take their information or do a drive-through. And this is when I wanted to hear from Sam because she is doing some of those things.
Can I ask a question real quick, Mary Louise?
Sure.
Are some of the organizations kind of releasing the requirements on how much information they need during this time? Are there?
I haven't heard it. USDA programs and food banks have a lot more restrictions than ours do. So if
And I
if
can speak
you're-
to,
say that again,
I
Sam.
can speak to that.
Oh, that'd
Okay.
be great. Yes.
Yeah, so, and again, Sam Metters, I work with the Mobile Food Pantry, which is an extension of the Bread of Life Food Pantry at Harrisburg United Methodist Church. And we have been, and I'm sure you have too if you're an agency of your food bank. If you're not, they have some really good kind of requirements there. They've loosened some of the requirements for us. I know we're a part of the Food Bank of Northeast Arkansas. And so one of the suggestions is to make sure that there's someone there to record with paperwork, but that you do not have anyone touching papers, touching pens, that sort of thing. So all of our documentation has been limited to getting names and then the number of people in households, which is kind of the basic stuff. And then our hope is that when things kind of open back up, we'll be able to get more information from those individuals. But it is a very, very difficult time to try to figure out some of the ways that we can make sure that we're following the rules, but also limiting direct contact with materials. So we want to make sure that we're doing that definitely. And I think if you are a food bank agency, finding ways to follow their rules. And I see Kenny is telling us that the Food Bank of Arkansas has loosened some of their restrictions for recording this month. I know everyone is wanting people to have the food that they want or that they need. And so we want to make that as readily available as possible. I know some of you are wondering kind of how we're doing drive-through pantries, and actually, Mary Louise, I love the idea of coming right to the front door. Because we don't have a front door, we have a truck door. We actually set up a canopy outside in the parking lot so they could literally drive right up to where our table was set with food. I would take a name and we would put the food in their car. They didn't have to get out.
Great.
For us, we only require a student ID. So it was fairly easy for them to show me through the window that they were a student. And then I'd take their name, how many people were in their household, and could put that food immediately in their car. So no touching, no getting out, no doing anything. And that was very helpful for us. And I'm sure that would be something that you could probably figure out a way to do, is to even get a little bit further away, perhaps, and into the parking lot. So it truly is a drive up experience. And they don't have to leave at all. If you have lots of people coming at the same time, you may need some help with some of the traffic flow. But people are generally willing to wait if they know that they're going to get food at the end of it. So be aware of some of those struggles and issues. So that's kind of how that worked for us. And in terms of this week, we've had 2 distributions that way this week. And that's certainly something that's really been good. We actually saw more students than we normally see because of this, because of what's going on in the world, but also because we were able to communicate it clearly. So all of our students knew that they were not to get out of their cars. So however you communicate with those who come to your food pantry, make sure that you do that and let them know exactly how things are going to work. They're probably already getting emails and information from other folks. So make sure that you contact them and let them know, okay, no getting out of your car. You're going to drive up. We're going to, just take the bare minimum requirements and we're going to give you your food, and be prepared in that way. You may need a few. I know we struggled with volunteers today. And so just make sure that you have plenty of people who are willing to be outside. I mean, I know that can be kind of a struggle for people who want to be in the pantry for some of us. And so we want to make sure that we have plenty of people who are out and who can be that smiling face greeting people, because people really want to see that too. I know for us that we're trying to figure out where our next food is going to come from. I saw some of you talking about that as well. Our food pantry was already low, or our food bank was already low on supplies. It's not getting any better. We're not USDA, so we're working with some of our partner pantries to see if they have extras. And we also are attempting to make some orders from grocery stores, but that again requires money. And grocery stores are back ordered. So I think the earliest we can get something out of the Harrisburg food giant is April 18th. So about a month back order, which will completely throw off kind of what we're doing. So kind of keep those things in mind. We have some plans in place to possibly partner with some of our churches in the area to see if they would do some collections. And in terms of collections, we're really thinking, can we have a drop-off location that's external to the building? So we have a trailer that we don't use that we're gonna open up to people to drop off things in that trailer so that we can distribute them. And so those are some of the ways that we're hoping to keep going. But again, this is evolving. And so trying to figure it out for your context is really difficult. And I know that, but hopefully we can find some ways to troubleshoot together.
I'm reading the chats, and I think having access to food is a real issue, is going to be a real issue. We're a week out, people are really needing food. One of the things I can do is continue to talk to the Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance. I'm sure they are hearing that from everybody, as well as all of their regional food banks are part of that alliance. And so I will share whatever ideas and solutions they can provide as I know them, either on Facebook or through the Arkansas United Methodist newsletter that goes out, I think, twice a week. But continue to pop up ideas in the chat for that, because obviously that's a real concern. So many of our churches are also do Wednesday night meals with the youth, or they do after school meals, or lots of other things. And part of the information that's coming out about meals is one and only thing is they need to be to go. And I don't know exactly how well supplies are available to make them a go with sacks and boxes, or those lidded compartments that you can send food out with, but they really need to be to go. So if you have best practices or you're thinking about doing meals to go, please start chatting about that so that everyone can share and see. Again, the rules are the same. Just set up just inside or outside the door for easy pickup by the person. Limit the time. Don't be open for 3 hours. Make it 1 to 2 or 12 to 1. An hour and a half. And provides hand sanitizer and wash hands regularly. Just kind of common sense with all of this. But the meals are going to be important. We're going to talk more about school meals in a minute with a different heading. I'm here talking about more the actual churches who are doing meals to families. Again, we've got to continue to connect with them. We don't want to lose them as part of people in our lives, and they're going to need the meals as much as ever. And so I just encourage people to keep providing those meals. Sack lunches, or cold sack lunches, can easily be done. I have been told, and you experts can tell me differently, that it's actually easier to cook meals in bulk than it is to make a bunch of sandwiches. If you do want to make a bunch of sandwiches, I believe Michael Bowler can do 100 in a very quick amount of time. So he would be a contact on saying, what's your assembly for sandwiches? Again, keep volunteers stations 6 feet apart from each other, give everybody a task, and just keep them safe that way. I wanted to check the chat. Is there anything, Michelle, that we want to talk about?
There's one question that came up in the Q&A that I want to raise, which is that people are worried about funding, how to fund this. And I mean, that's a very real challenge because our churches are closed. And so one of the things that I would point you to is we did do a webinar earlier this week on how to get online giving online. And we've also done webinars on how to stream Facebook Live and YouTube. The reason that I bring both of those things up is that you can still worship online. And if you still worship online, you can still have times for giving in that space. You can have an offertory moment, and you can also post a plea on Facebook, and you can, if you prove that you're a 501c3 organization, you can get a donate button. Donut button would be great, wouldn't it? No, you can get a donate button attached with Facebook, so people can donate there. I will tell you that one of the ways that people are actually seeing funding still come into the church, besides, of course, our loyal church members, is by sharing what they're doing to feed people, what they're doing to respond to needs in their neighborhood. That's actually going out on Facebook and bringing in a lot of, in some, I have anecdotal cases at least from this past week of folks giving to churches that they don't even go to because they're seeing this plea on Facebook Live, and it is their neighborhood church, even if they don't go to that neighborhood church. So I just encourage you to not be scared to ask for money. And especially when you do in the frame of, we have hungry neighbors, we have this food pantry that is bare. We're going to have to come up with some creative new ways for stocking it. And we could use some funding in order to be able to do that. So,
Michelle,
yeah.
I was going to add also that, setting up a Facebook give is absolutely free, and Facebook does not charge anything for any transactions. It just takes a little bit of prep work to get it done. So start working on that. I want to make sure that everyone understands, though, that when you do a Facebook Give campaign, this does not need to be a general fund campaign. This needs to be a specific ministry area, specific for like what we're talking about for your feeding program. And and another recommendation on marketing this would be to break it down and say a $5 donation would provide this many boxes of food or this many meals, and because that makes people, and a $10 donation would provide this much, and a $20 donation would provide this much. That really speaks to people, and that is that has been a trend in fundraising as of late that seems to really be working and helps people be able to visualize exactly what their money is going towards. So just a few thoughts there.
I'm also going to share in the chat the link for the online giving webinar and for the streaming one, so that if you miss those, you can go in and catch those there.
Also, pray. I have requested from No Kid Hungry to have permission to submit an application for emergency food. I don't know that we'll get it, but being a statewide connectional system, I would love to see us get some emergency food funding from No Kid Hungry out of Feeding America, but we'll see. That's one of the things I've been doing today is trying to figure out where we might can find some money to help do some sub grants for this. I know Walmart has committed $25 million. I don't know what their application process looks like yet. But if there is a funding process, then we'll make sure to share that as well. But I think with Michelle and Amy were saying, trying to find those resources in your community are going to be more immediate and probably more helpful, if not equally as helpful, because I don't know how much we ought to be able to find or be able to give. So one of the and most of you already probably have some ministries, so it'd be great if we could just continue to push out. One of the major concerns coming up is spring break next week. And this is particularly in rural counties, in rural areas. Some of schools are not choosing to take advantage of the waivers and continue to provide meals next week. We have Cabot United Methodist Church had worked with another church for the past 2 or 3 spring breaks to provide meals to kids during the spring break time. And so that's one concern next week that we have. So if you know of anyone, or if you're looking for a ministry providing meals, either breakfast and lunch, or just lunch and a snack, or just lunch, during the break would be an incredible way to support those in need in your area. In order to do that, we don't want schools, we need to find out if your local school is actually serving meals. And that's just one person taking the lead and calling the school and asking. Usually if somebody in the office will answer, they'll be able to tell you. If not, they'll be able to find out. One of the resources that the Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance is building a list of those schools. I did not get it today, even though I requested it. That means it's not complete or not quite done. So continue to look at the Hunger Relief Alliance on their Facebook page. They'll post it there, but I'm also asking for it, and they know to send it to me so that I can share it as well. In these smaller communities, there are a lot of smaller churches. So to imagine trying to feed 50, 60 students 5 days next week would be really overwhelming. And so we're encouraging you all to invite other faith communities into what you're doing. Reach out to all the other churches. Some may not be able to do anything either. They don't have the leadership, but they just want to be asked. So don't be afraid to ask for other local faith communities to help. One idea was for gather 5 and each community take 1 day of the week. The important thing will be to also communicate with the school where and when those lunches will be distributed, and they can help communicate that to their students. They have access to the students, they can let them know where it is. The key will be to pick one location. So if you're inviting other churches to participate, have them come to one central spot so the kids know to go to the same place every day. You don't want them moving to all these different spots over the week and getting confused. I don't know how this works. I've heard about people doing this, and it's something that can be worked out with the school, but to drive the bus routes and deliver meals along the bus routes. That's really particularly needed in rural counties where they can't get to the school. So unless the parents can actually drive them. Michelle, you were saying that there was, tell them about your.
So my son goes to Jessieville, and they were delivering homework. They're running the buses to deliver homework because we have limited broadband availability. So they've put much of school online, but we have several folks, particularly again in the rural areas, that can't use online options. So they're hand delivering their packets, and so they're running the buses. Now I don't know that they'll do it over the spring break week, but we do know that the governor said the schools are to be closed until the 17th through the 17th of April today. So so my guess is that my district's buses will run homework again, and it would be great if we could pair with that and have food delivered at the same time. So just having the conversation with the schools is a very important first step to start talking through the logistics of how all this can unfold.
I was just reading Kenny Lee's response that no one showed up. I would say it's probably hard for kids to get to the school. And so if we have church vans or people who are willing to drive along those bus routes and hand out food, that's the easiest way to get food out to families. Or kids who are home alone because their parents are still working, right? The backpack programs, a lot of kids rely on that weekend food, and there are a lot of backpack programs. I mean, I can't tell you how many there are. I would say most every school system probably has one, or elementary. So when you call, ask if they have one, because they may have not the ability to get the food out, or they may have it in a closet somewhere. And could y'all also not pass out food boxes at least once that next week when also are passing out meals. Building a partnership with the schools is important now, and it's one to have long-term because there's so much need there, and they're so willing to have faith communities come in and help. And so this is just one way. Bentonville United Methodist Church did summer meals, and they simply called and said, hey, how can we help? And they said, well, we just need somebody to drive the summer meals around. So they may have the food, they just don't know how to get it out to kids, especially in these rural county school districts. So here is what I did find out. The last thing I found out from Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance, and I talked to or emailed all of the executive directors at the 5 regional food banks. And the feedback I got from them was, first and foremost, keep it local. If y'all are going to do a food collection, keep it local. There's no reason to take it to a food bank because they're just going to have to turn around and send it right back out to food pantries or to other programs. So food collections will do great. If you need a food collection, think about trying to do it locally as well. Of course, they would ask for financial donations, and some do need volunteers. The Arkansas Food Bank has a relationship with the Little Rock School District, and I believe potentially the Pine Bluff School District. So they are providing a lot of the food, and they need help getting it out. At first, they did not do well in practicing social distances with their volunteers, but they are doing it very well now. If you're in a small town and there's not much happening locally, then go regional. And that's the 5 regional food banks. Again, at the Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance. And in the communication that went out in the newsletter today, there's a link to that. There's a list of the 5 regional food banks. You can see a map of which county goes with which food bank. And ask before you go, no matter where you're going, if it's local or regional. Ask one, if they need you, and then how they need you, and then ask them, are they practicing safe social distancing for volunteers? You don't want to go if you're compromised in any way. And we'll continue to share as we can. I wanted Michelle to kind of talk a little bit, and myself and Michelle talk about care for our seniors. One, there are a lot of seniors that are also hungry. We are the #1 top in the nation for elder hunger, whereas we're #2 in the nation for childhood hunger. So there is equally as many elderly as there are children who are hungry. And a lot of grandparents have kids in their household. So they're on a fixed income. They're already food insecure and they're raising their own grandkids. So think about those in your neighborhood who are seniors and who are homebound. But this also goes for your church. We're kind of moving outside of just food, but how do we connect with our neighbors who are the elderly, knowing that they don't need to be getting out, especially if they are super compromised, but they also may not ask anyone for help, right? So phone trees, good old-fashioned phone trees, right? Have, for those in your church, add people in your neighborhood, add your friends, add your coworkers who are seniors or retirees, or who have compromised systems that don't need to be exposed. Add them, and then send them notes if you know their address. I wanted Michelle to talk about visitations. She heard some information today about those.
Yeah, so chatting with pastors about the realities of visitation. So most nursing homes now are really closing their doors to visits to try and protect their residents. So I encourage you to reach out to those folks in the nursing home through cards and through phone calls if you can call in there. I also want to encourage you to be in care for their families who are also now isolated from those folks, and that a phone call from you to them would be important at this time as well. But even, I mean, really, those hand notes help people stay connected and help people remember that you remember them, right? Also want to talk about hospital visits. We really, really, really need to be attentive to the fact that it seems like every hospital is changing their visitation policy, and there's not a standard change that's happening. So it's important for you to call pretty much every day, as the visitation policy seems to be changing almost by the hour. Call every day, get an update on what the visitation policy is, and then also be in communication with the family of whoever is in the hospital to see how much exposure they want you to have with their loved one. And for instance, we have heard of a case where a pastor went to visit, had been told that the ICU visitation policy was no more than 2 people visiting a day, and they thought that meant 2 at any given time. And so they went to pray with the person at 8 o'clock that morning, and then for the rest of the day, only 1 family member could go back because that pastor had counted as the first visitor. And the family was very upset. It was a completely innocent misunderstanding, but we really want to be clear and attentive to what the hospital visitation policies are. We also want to be clear and attentive to the fact that if we're out amongst people, which as pastors we still are to some extent, maybe we shouldn't be going to the hospitals. Maybe the best thing to do is to call or to send a card or be present in other ways. But have the family help guide you on that, have the hospitals and their visitation policy help guide you on that as well. Yeah, so just good communication is going to be key through all of this. And it's going to be, as Mary Louise mentioned, good old-fashioned communication, cards, letters, phone calls, that sort of thing, in order for us to stay in contact with folks. If you can teach your seniors how to use Zoom, that's a great way to check in with them. Or if you can teach them how to use FaceTime, or if they already know how to use FaceTime, then at least you can get that face-to-face contact of sorts through there. But if not, then phone still works, notes still work. Keep your contact that way.
In addition, I'm sure many people have already thought about this, but they may have issues accessing food. If we're talking about low-income families or food insecure elders, then they may need food from the food pantry, but there may be some who don't. And so asking them if they need a grocery store run or a pharmacy run, if they would allow you to do that for them, that's an easy way to be of assistance to them. Kenny, I saw your chats about the school next door. So I want to come back to that before we move on to the next topic. And so when I see that, there has to be several different things happening. One is lack of communication from the school to the families. So could we call the school and say, hey, I've got a group of 10 volunteers who are willing to go put notes on people's doors and say, hey, there's food for your kids if they go to this school. They should be able to make the copies for you, and then y'all can go out and post them. The other thing that can be happening are people are just fearful. They don't want to leave their apartments, and they don't want to send their kids out to public. And so part of that communication can say, we're doing social distancing, we're keeping everything 6 feet away, you will pick up your own box of food, that kind of thing. Or you could work with the school to maybe take it across the street and say, we will leave your lunch outside your door between this time, and knock on the door and then leave, so that there's no social interaction whatsoever. It's just a way to communicate that distancing that we're all trying to practice. But that's a real issue. I'm going to share that with Kathy Webb with the Hunger Relief Alliance, because that's something they need to know. And they have a strong voice in the city and around the state with what's happening around school lunches. So, Michelle?
Yeah, we do encourage you to continue to connect with your worshiping community, and we've covered in a couple of the other webinars some of the ways to do that, but just to summarize those again, you can print and mail sermons or devotionals. You can obviously email those as well, but for some, particularly some of the seniors that are disconnected from electronic media, printing and mailing is a good option. You can burn DVDs of a recorded worship. And I was just on the phone with a pastor in rural part of Arkansas who said, my people, we don't have access to good broadband. And so we are recording the worship. We are going ahead and loading it up for the few that can use it. But for everyone else, we've got a list of a mailing list that we're burning a DVD and sending them the worship that way. And then for how to upload, live stream, record, those kinds of video services, again, those webinars that I put in the chat, we point you to those as a resource for that. And then you can get in touch with us in the conference offices. We can give some further information if you need help kind of navigating that. By all means, get in touch with us. But we can stay connected. We can continue to worship. We can continue to be in community with one another, even if we can't be in the same room with one another. So I just want to encourage you to be innovative, to try those different ways. I know a lot of our rural churches are making agreements with the local radio stations to broadcast on radio. And that's another option that's available as well. So you can get that information out to your community. We opened up with a reflection on Luke, in which we raised the question, who is my neighbor, right? And I think we've done quite a good amount of work over the past few years to help us understand that our neighbor is beyond the people that are next door to us, right? That we need to reach out to those folks that we don't know. We need to have wide open doors and wide open spaces and invite everyone into that place. And what we may have done actually is forgotten how to get to know the person right next door. So I want us to also think about reclaiming that the person right next door is our neighbor. And when Jesus calls us to love our neighbor, that can very literally be that challenge for us, especially in this time. They're the closest in proximity to us. I shared with Mary Lewis this afternoon that in most of the places that I've lived, I have not known my neighbors very well, my immediate neighbors very well. In fact, when I lived in Texas, we lived in the same house for 9 years. And I knew the people to this side of me because they had small children and I had a small child, and so they played together. But the man on this side of me, I did not know for about the first 5 years, 4 or 5 years that we were there. And how I finally got to know him was our fence fell down between us. And we had to make a decision about whose fence it was and how it was going to be paid for and all of that. So I like to say bad fences, in fact, make good neighbors, because that's what got us to open our doors and to talk with one another. So we want to talk in terms about how you can reach out to your actual neighbors in this time and still also maintain good social distancing practices. So perhaps what you want to do is you want to just spend some time in your front yard, especially as the weather gets better. Put a lawn chair out there, and as people are walking their dogs by, just wave and say hello. And you've still got at least 6 feet between you. We talked about, people could set up lawn chairs in each of their front yards and yell across the street to each other. We used to do that. And so maybe this is the time when we reclaim that reality of all being in our front yards and yelling back and forth to one another. The other thing is that you could go to your neighbor's doors, leave a note that says, hey, I'm your neighbor, I live at such and such. If you need anything, if you need me to run to the grocery store, if you need me to help pick up some medicine, or if you just need to chat, this is my phone number and I'd be happy to chat with you, or just offer to be helpful and be a presence in some way with folks. And you might also in that note put something about, if you need me to pray for you, please call and tell me, and I'd be happy to be in prayer for you. And then we've been talking about how to gather food for our pantries. The Boy Scouts leave bags and say, we'll be back on this day to collect food. We could do the same thing. I bet we have a ton of Walmart bags in our house. You could type up a little note. You could say, you know what, my church has a food pantry. They're really in need of food. If you have anything that you could spare that's non-perishable, like a can of green beans even, or if you have toiletries, if you accidentally overstocked on toilet paper, right, that you wouldn't mind donating, then I'll be back by at this time to pick up this bag. And you could put on there, you can follow my church on Facebook, and we will post pictures of our neighborhood food gathering and our disbursement, and still honoring the privacy of the families who come and pick up, but you can post pictures of the volunteers at work spread out 6 feet from each other, and that's a way to engage your neighbors in doing some good even in the midst of this moment. So that would be a real opportunity for us to kind of fulfill two things, right? We would get to know our neighbors. We would also be able to help stock our food pantries. So invite you to think creatively about that, about how you can be in mission and ministry with your actual neighbors and invite them into that space as well.
All right, so we are about to wrap up. I'm going to share this. Just one of the last questions I kind of wanted to discuss was just how do we keep up? Information is changing so rapidly, and every day. And sorry, I think I just ended the clock shot. There we go. Okay. so quickly. And so how do we keep up? And one, the easy, we're going to keep putting material out through the Arkansas United Methodist e-newsletter. Social media, Facebook is going to be a way many organizations are going to be communicating the latest news. But as Michelle said, we definitely need to protect our souls and not go down those rabbit holes. So I encourage you to go directly to those Facebook friends or pages that you know are going to provide you helpful information. Again, I think the Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance and the 200,000 Web Reasons pages will provide some important information as well. I'm going to let Michelle talk about collaborate with colleagues because it was quite ingenious and I thought it was great.
So after the bishop's prayer and devotional time with the pastors this past Wednesday, I have my ordination class actually regularly retreats together still and is in communication with one another. So I sent out actually one of them texted and said he's hungry. He's usually at the diner at this time, but he couldn't go to the diner. And I said, hey, how about virtual breakfast? So we sent out an invitation to the class and we gathered for about 30 minutes. Everybody was eating their bowls of cereal or their egg casserole or whatever, drinking their tea. And we just chatted and shared some ideas, but also just shared our souls. Just, this is where we are right now. This is what we're doing. And so it's a way we can use technology, like I said, to continue to be connected. So I encourage you to not do this alone. Please do not do this alone. We are a connectional church. And we should value and use and be part of that connection. So if that means, the folks that you're good friends with, that you always love catching up with at annual conference, shoot them a text and say, hey, what if we just had a Zoom lunch where we were all sitting at our tables and eating lunch together on, Thursday afternoon. I'm going to send out the invitation and let's just gather for a little while. Please do that. It's going to be good for your souls. It'll also spark that kind of creative juice when you're learning from your colleagues what else they're doing. There have been virtual happy hours. There have been virtual, all kinds of virtual gatherings are starting to pop up so that we don't get too isolated and too alone and try to do this work alone because we don't need to. I mean, we need our social distancing piece, but we can still stay connected to one another and still lean on one another, pray for one another, support one another, and collaborate with one another. So I encourage you to use those ideas as well.
All right, that is all we had on our agenda to talk about tonight.
I would like to invite Amy, if she could, to share one more time about the communication grants that are available, because some of the things that we talked about tonight there's some funding that can help with that.
Sure. So the United Methodist Foundation has graciously allowed the Center for Communication to distribute some grants for improving communication and connection during this pandemic. One of those is through a Zoom grant, which is to allow your church to have this Zoom platform for approximately 6 months. Another one is for a Mevo video camera system that is able to just do video, but also it can do live streaming as well, and all of the camera angles, editing, production, all comes from using a cell phone. That's some of the people who utilize these already have their youth doing it, which I think is just wonderful. They sit on the second row in church with their cell phone and they run the video camera. Anyway, which is wonderful. So the next grant opportunity is a gas reimbursement grant, and that is for pastors who are particular consideration will be given to those pastors who are in rural areas and who also have a 2-point charge. And this is to help you with making one-on-one visits, or if you are having to run food back and forth or give a quick technology lesson or any of that, even though we are social distancing, sometimes there is just going to have to be some visits to check on people or to see people. And this is a voucher to help with additional mileage during this time. And then finally, grants will be given to churches for paper and postage who may not already have a newsletter in working. And so we want to be able to provide paper and postage for smaller churches to be able to fund this connective tool, especially for those churches in poor broadband areas. So the deadline for applying for these grants is April 1st. We will be handing out some checks next week for the Zoom platforms. If you have requests for any of these, please go to arumc.org. And it is the very first page that's going to pop up is going to be the COVID-19 page. And this is all of the information about the grants is at the very bottom of that COVID-19 page. And you can see what the requirements are, you can see how to apply, and what information we need from you, as well as a better description of all of the different grants.
Great. Sorry, I was making notes. All right, we're wrapping it up. Michelle, do you have anything you want to add to wrap up, or?
No, we will stay on here a few more minutes. If anybody has any other questions or any other comments they want to offer. Otherwise, know that we are here in service to you. And if you have questions, if you need advice or need connections with different services, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If there are other pieces of education that you could use, please also let us know. We'd be happy to pull some more of these webinars together. Just know that we are praying for you, and we are here to support you in whatever way we can. We're so grateful for all the ways that you're serving on the ground, all the ways that you are making a difference for Jesus in the midst of this a very interesting and challenging time. And we ask that you just know that we pray often that the Holy Spirit is with you and giving you strength. So we'll stay on here, like I said, a few more minutes if you want to continue to chat or share any ideas. For those of you who are ready to go, feel free to leave. Thank you so much for being with us.
Bye. Thanks, Sam and Michelle and Amy.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mary Louise, thanks for your work.
Yeah.